This episode is brought to you by Bayer Crop Science, weeding out uncertainty.
We have a double-edged sword. During the winter months, we're pumping thousands of gallons out into the North Sea because we've got nowhere to retain it. Yet in the summer months, we have areas which are drier than Jerusalem.
As drought conditions worsen across England, MPs urge the government to make sure farming gets its fair share of water. How Defra's new farmer welfare grant could create more resilient farm businesses. Selling grain to the right people, what to watch out for. And a special anniversary for the Aberdeen-Angus cattle breed. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Our top story this week, an influential group of Labour MPs is calling for urgent government action to ensure farmers have adequate access to water. It follows the driest July on record, which has seen drought declared across more than half of England. 15 Labour MPs have signed an open letter to Defra Secretary Angela Eagle asking the government to prioritise support for vulnerable farm businesses and make it easier for farmers to invest in reservoirs, irrigation and other resilience measures. Here's Ben Goldsborough, Labour MP for South Norfolk.
I think this is where we have to think very imaginatively in terms of where we go forward with water management, because we have a double-edged sword within East Anglia at least. During the winter months, we're pumping thousands of gallons out into the North Sea because we've got nowhere to retain it. Yet in the summer months, we have areas which are drier than Jerusalem. So we have to be more imaginative in terms of how we're collecting our water resources. But also, it's not just the physical infrastructure, which is what I find a lot of politicians want to talk about because you know how much we love wearing high-vis and hard hats and everything like that. I think actually what's more important as well is the regulations. So many of my farmers in South Norfolk are constantly petrified to do anything with water management because they think either Natural England or the Environment Agency are going to slap them around the wrist, even though they know better than anyone else on how to manage our waterways. And that's perfectly clear in lots of my bit of the catchment area of the River Yare, for example. So one of the things I think we need to do as well is have flexible abstraction licenses. And this will scare maybe inner city MPs that think that we're going to be pumping the countryside dry. It's not about that. It's about making sure we have environmental benefit and we keep those at the forefront of our mind. But at the same time, we give the farmers the flexibility and the surety of abstraction going forward, because we've got stories at the moment of the tap being turned off effectively. And we're looking at potato crops right now and we're going, oh, heck, this is about to go terribly wrong. But also broilers. This is so many different aspects within agriculture that we need to have that surety. And I think finally as well, when we look at this, as you rightfully say, about conflicting interest, is we need to have a final decision now from the heart of government. What is most important in rural England and rural Wales and rural Scotland? Because if we need to be putting data centres above everything else, then that's where the water's going to go. Now, I would argue, as your listeners would probably imagine, as a South Norfolk MP, we need to be looking at food security. That's where our water, first and foremost, must go.
That's what you're doing as an MP, Ben. What are you asking farmers to do to get the message across?
First of all, they also need to be getting in touch with their local representatives as well. Because what I fear that is happening now is we're getting this two-speed conversation. I have a brilliant working relationship with the NFU or the Horticultural Trades Association or the Tomato Growers Association. Those that are representing our farmers do a very good job of being in touch with their local MPs or their councillors. But what I always will encourage, and I'm very lucky, South Norfolk, I've got my farmers will always get in touch with me and they'll let me know what's going on in the ground, in their patch. And that helps me have the tools I need to do things like writing this joint letter with 15 other MPs calling on the government to act now because of what was being told to me on the ground. But the other thing as well, I think what we need to have is a more grown-up conversation with the public, because all too often I think the public think, and it's because of, and I say this with warmth and affection, because of the direction of travel programs like Country File have gone in, which paint the farmers as the bad guy more often than not, is given some of our people in our community this idea that farmers are just on the take instead of trying to protect our environment. And I think having these conversations with our wider communities about why water management done by farmers in the local area is the best way forward is another way of delivering that change. Because if the public changes its opinion on what water is being used for in agriculture, well, by heck, we're then going to get the change from decision makers like ministers, like those quangos that operate across government.
And are those ministers listening? I mean, Jenny Riddle-Carpenter, Suffolk Coastal MP, founder member of the Labour Rural Research Group of MPs, of which you're also a founder member, is now a Defra junior minister. Can we be more helpful that we now have a rural voice, or at least a rural listening ear within the department?
Yeah, and I think this is the big change. When I myself was a founding member of the Labour Rural Research Group, the whole point of our design and our coming about was not just because of the lightning rod issue that sort of formed and coalesced us, which was APR and BPR inheritance tax, but was actually trying to mend those bridges to also come up with those policy answers, not just to come up with how you can design the best leaflet that works well in a rural area, which is not what I'm about. It's actually how can we get policy that works for our rural economies? And that's working with the CLA and the NFU and other bodies as well. And I think what we're seeing now, it started with the changes in AHT, which was welcomed. I still think we need to go further, but that's a story for another time. But I think what we're seeing now is a government that realises that it now has the majority of rural constituencies. And it can't just carry on, as was under the previous Prime Minister, just taking us for granted and thinking, oh, they're nice to have. We're not nice to have. We are representing our areas to the best of our abilities. And that's what the LRRG does. And there are so many members that I could highlight. James Naish, for example. You know, we've got Maya Ellis. The list goes on. Terry Jeremy, my next door neighbour by one. All these people are speaking into the ear of ministers, but also civil servants on a constant basis. And that is delivering the change that we need to make sure that rural areas are the heart of public policy making.
And Ben, this letter to Defra, when can we expect a reply? You haven't had one yet.
Not yet. I mean, this is one of the shortcomings I'll always say with Defra. It's one of the slowest departments for getting a response back, but we're still within normal time at the moment for when I'd expect a reply to come forward.
South Norfolk MP Ben Goldsborough, and we will, of course, report fully on that Defra reply to that open letter when it is received. Meanwhile, Defra is encouraging farmers concerned about the drought to contact the Rural Payments Agency and to access its extreme weather guidance. Louise, we've talked repeatedly on the podcast about the need for farming to have its fair share of water. Ben Goldsborough there picking up that baton and running with it.
Yeah, he did actually sound, didn't he? Very reassuring that he knows what he's talking about and that he's in regular communication with the farmers in his constituency and that he does understand the issues that they're going through. Slightly more concerning for me was the fact that he did admit that Defra was the department that takes the longest to respond or reply to any letter like that. So that's a little bit of a concern. And I have to say the phrase fiddling while Rome burns came into my mind when he said that. But they are expecting a reply, aren't they? And he seemed to think that would be sooner rather than later. And obviously, you know, we've talked about drought, haven't we, in the last few weeks a bit, but, you know, there are various ways that the government could help here. And they range from some immediate financial relief to, you know, the much longer term infrastructure investment that's needed. So, you know, they have raised all of those issues, haven't they, in that letter. The other thing, of course, that we probably do need at the moment is this flexibility with some of the regulation. And I'm thinking here about, you know, being able to graze some of these stewardship mixes, things like that, which could just make a real difference very, very quickly. So, yeah, I mean, let's hope that Ben and his colleagues, the others that have signed that letter, can really get their voices heard. And let's hope that Defra makes a decision sooner rather than later, because this is a really serious situation now. And we keep seeing these figures, don't they? I mean, the national news have been all over this, whether it's the earliest harvest in 20 years, the driest or hottest July since records began. And, they've even started to put some of the financial losses, put the numbers out there now, what this is going to mean to farming and to food. So, I don't think Defra can ignore this for much longer. That's my view. It is really, really serious. So we've all got to keep the pressure on, not just this group of MPs, but thank goodness they are doing something.
Now, I'm sure Defra would say, Louise, that it is taking the situation seriously. And as I say, we will cover that Defra response to that open letter from those MPs when it is published. Hugh, Tom Lancaster of the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit saying that this is the third awful harvest in a row, farming now the sector most exposed to climate change and farmers in danger of entering a climate doom loop.
Yeah, I can well believe that. I mean, given what we've been up against again this year, Paul Behrens, who is a professor in environmental change at the University of Oxford, is saying one bad harvest and one warm year, that's weather, he said, but 3 of the worst harvests in the last 5 years, that's climate change. And he's absolutely right. And it's back to the whole thing, isn't it? About resilience, about how do we take people forward. Some people are doing a very good job adapting their farming systems, say, for example, on arable, in terms of their crop establishment, conserving soil, conserving moisture and soil structure. And they are, dare I say it, some are doing okay even in the current drought. It's still challenging. It's not a golden bullet by a long shot, but their crops looking better than the vast majority, which are not established in that way and are obviously have struggled. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places have struggled. And it's that push. We need to up the initiative, up the momentum, don't we? Whether it's about developing irrigation reservoirs simply and easily with simple regulation, hopefully with some funding, or whether it's actually still, we constantly talk about this transition. We talk about resilience. We talk about changing our growing systems, but it's still, there's not huge amounts happening. There are huge amounts happening, rather, which are still relatively unchanged over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I get there are people that are pioneering and doing amazing things, but there's a heck of a lot that aren't. And we still need a huge push to get people to wake up to this, not just within government and policy and decision makers, but actually on farms. They've got to wake up because they're still in denial, a lot of people.
We are going to talk about resilience in just a moment, but Louise, you wanted to come back on that.
I think I'm going to have to slightly disagree with that last bit, Hugh. I travel around to a lot of, and I know they are arable farms, but there's an awful lot of work that's been done on soils and in particular on improving infiltration rates and the water holding capacity of these soils. I mean, that is happening. That's happening everywhere I go. And I think I would have to say at this point, that there is only so much that farmers can do on that sort of thing to improve the situation, because what they're having to do now, which is different to before, is that they're having to manage extremes within seasons. And that leads to all sorts of difficulties. I mean, really compromised decisions. And, when you look this year at what's happened to spring crops, for example, decisions to grow those seem wrong, don't they, at the moment? Well, or the decision that was taken to grow those seems wrong. Well, of course, they've been very much an important part of more diverse rotations and more diverse farming systems. So, the whole thing is causing big problems in the here and now. So I think, as I said, there is only so much that you can do, and then we're going to need help from outside of that.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
The Farmers Weekly Autumn Drilling Update with Bayer Crop Science, weeding out uncertainty.
And we're joined now by Rachel Banks from Bayer. Rachel, we're here at Bayer's research farm in Cambridgeshire. We can hear a little bit of combining still going on in the background, but crops also going in the ground as we speak. How should growers be adapting what they're doing this autumn when it comes to crop establishment?
So I think it's really important that we're looking at farms on a field-by-field basis, and especially bringing in a lot of expertise and knowledge, whether that's from your local agronomist, whether from all of our technical team. We're happy to help and give advice, and also looking at information from previous years to help build up that knowledge. So trials, independent trials. Again, we do a lot of trials. We're on our research farm today, and seeing what's working elsewhere and what you can potentially implement for your specific situation.
One thing that will be occupying growers' minds this season, as every season, is resistance. If you could give farmers just one piece of advice when it comes to protecting their herbicide chemistry, what would it be?
That would definitely be to mix and change up our modes of action that we're using on farm, whether in sequence or in mixture, using different chemistries, and especially looking towards the newer chemistries we've got coming along as well. Us as Bayer, we have looking in 2027 to bring forward an aclonophen DFF co-form, and actually we're even aiming in 2028 to bring a bixazone DFF and Empire mix. So we've got lots of new things, so it's really important to utilise those to protect what we already have, and also in the future, what we're going to be using.
So good stewardship when it comes to existing chemistry, but also looking ahead to different modes of action from different forms of chemistry.
Exactly, yeah. In terms of protecting things, it's just important that we're not using the same thing over and over. And that's where new developments in chemistry are really important.
Well, that's this week's top tip when it comes to the autumn drilling update, brought to you with Bayer Crop Science. Rachel Banks from Bayer, thank you very much.
The Farmers Weekly Autumn Drilling Update with Bayer Crop Science. Weeding out uncertainty.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, a £1.5 million fund to improve farmer well-being and farm business resilience has opened for applications. Defra's expanded farmer welfare grant will provide 3 years of funding for charities and not-for-profit organisations supporting farmers across England. I caught up with farm leadership and resilience coach Samantha Seaman, who told me the fund is badly needed.
Farmers are being challenged hugely. There's increasing pressures all the time, and a lot of these pressures that they are sort of feeling at the moment are uncontrollables, and like the weather, government policies, market prices, crop failures. We all know harvest this year has been a very quick one, poor yields, prices aren't great. That puts a huge amount of pressure on farmers, and what I try and do is make the client, the farmer, to really focus on what is in their control. So yes, we are in unprecedented times at the moment in farming, but what can we do to actually flip this, to actually turn it into a positive?
And you were saying before we started recording, Sammy, that as an industry, we do worry too much about the uncontrollables, the things that are out of our control.
Yeah, and I think we can, and I've done it as well, this hypothetical worry where we're worrying about things that haven't even happened. You're using so much energy, and it's really tiring when you're worrying about things that you just can't control. And being a farmer's daughter and wife, but especially listening to my grandfather and my father, the weather had such an impact on their mood. Oh God, it's rained too much, or it hasn't rained enough, and but we can't control that. So yes, the weather plays a huge part in our lives, because obviously it helps the crops, the grass to grow, the crops to grow, great for the soil, but ultimately, we cannot control that. So it's really important we refocus the mind. But what can we do? Well, we can actually focus on what we can start to implement in our business on the farm, how we speak to our people, how we treat our people, how we implement different systems that are going to make our life easier, taking advantage of these grants, like this funding, like that's a really positive move. We cannot control what the government's going to do, and that's something that's difficult to accept, but it's always, that's out of our control. So let's not waste time and energy moaning about it. Let's do something about it.
So what does your coaching involve then, Sammy? How does it work?
Coaching is really individual. So if someone was sort of seeking clarity and wanting to understand themselves and kind of how they move forward, how they grow and communicate, yeah, absolutely. Coaching can be done in person or online. And that's a case of really understanding the setup, the individual, what's their end goal, why are you coming to coaching? Coaching's all about moving forward, so embracing change. That person's coming to you because they know that they're stuck or they want to embrace change. They just don't know quite how to get from A to B. There's also training. So I do courses, workshops, talks on sort of positive psychology, leadership, how to get the best out of your people. So really focusing on the people side of agriculture, how to handle pressure, how to understand your mindset, really getting clear on what your personal business resilience plans look like, so you've got something tangible that you can work to. So in 6 months' time or a year, actually, yeah, I started here and I've ended up with this. So I know that I feel more confident having those conversations. When something goes wrong, I don't crumble. I don't think the world is against me. I focus in on what it is that I can control and break it down, have those goals set so that we can feel that we can celebrate small successes. And I don't think people do that in farming enough, is actually reflecting back of a quarter or even, over a month of like, what one thing did I do really well? Like what small thing, what are the small wins? Because if we are so focused on all the doom and gloom that's going on in this world, which as humans, we are really negatively biased, it can become really consuming and quite depressive. But actually, when we start to go, oh, actually, I implemented this, or we started to do this on the farm and the staff really did respond well, I can see that drilling at this point in time or using this seed or spraying a certain thing has really paid off. Pat yourself on the back, go down the pub with your farming mates and speak together and share ideas. It's all about sharing knowledge and improving one another. So I think it's about creating that community. And I'd say the training really helps. So getting people together, because once you've got them in a room and it's interactive, people start to share ideas and challenges. You don't feel so alone. You understand that actually, oh God, so-and-so really feels that too. I'm not the only one. And you start to share these ideas, and it feels really empowering, and it gives you that confidence to then have conversations where you might want to start implementing change.
That's leadership coach Samantha Seaman on resilience. Louise, I guess in sporting parlance, this is what's known as bounce back ability. This Defra farmer welfare grant, much needed too.
Well, sadly, yes, I think it is much needed. When I've looked up the definition of resilience, it says that it's the ability to recover from a setback, so to bounce back, if you like. So we are having setbacks, aren't we, at the moment, whether that's testing weather or low prices, they are there. And the trouble is they keep coming at the moment. So the change thing, of course, has been going on in the background for quite a few years now. So the whole thing is just, I suppose, boiling up, really, for some businesses especially. And they are going to need this help. I hope that the demand can be met, that the service, there'll be adequate funding and adequate service providers, that people can get the help that they need. So it's over 3 years, isn't it? So for the next 3 years, this is going to run. And we have to, be pleased that it's there and to be hopeful that it delivers what's needed.
And Hugh, there will be there's a lot of change going on. There will be a lot of support needed.
There's going to be a huge amount of support needed, isn't it? I mean, in the audio, there talks about transition of businesses and all this. We know about all this business transition that's been required, whether it's, it started out as business transitions 10 years ago to transition away from the sort of drip feed of cash that was coming out of the CAP and the single farm payment and regular payments that people have been used to for 30 years or 20 odd years. That was the transition. The transition now is learning to cope with drought as well as all the other stuff. And if you look at the challenges that are now live with the weather and what's happened this summer, there is some huge, huge holes to fill, whether that's, trying to establish a reservoir network, whether that's still getting people to move or to incentivize them to move or change their production systems to make them more resilient. That resilience piece goes way below. Whilst it's really important to be resilient in terms of mental health and looking after yourself within your business, the fabric of agriculture needs to be more resilient going forward if we're to cope with the challenges that we're seeing now weather-wise.
Thank you, Hugh. And we will put a link to Samantha Seaman's website and indeed the Defra Farmer Welfare Grant website on the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast.
The Farmers Weekly podcast. The Farmers Weekly podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. Another hot one this week, the hottest July on record. Another heatwave on the way, more on harvest in just a moment. But first, an update on the Bluetongue situation in southwest England and the West Country. Hugh, the situation getting worse.
Yeah, it is getting worse. I think the official figure is circa about 189 cases, but it's many, many more than that. And it's mainly because the process of getting the results out of the lab is quite slow. It's still taking 10 to 14 days to get test results back. And we're still hearing from many colleagues, particularly down in this southwest hotspot, who are seeing it affecting their animals. So that's really distressing for them. It's predominantly, when you look at the map, it's North Devon down into North Cornwall. There are one or two smatterings. There's like 4 official cases in Wales. Now, there may be many other, some more cases than that, but officially confirmed there are 4 cases in Wales. There are a smattering of cases around sort of Derbyshire Derby across to Stoke-on-Trent up towards Chester. A few cases. There's one just north of Manchester, one in Preston. And then there's one over in the northeast near Hull. Now, it could be that some of the northern people are vaccinated up together because the Scottish regulations now state that if you were a sheep breeder in the north of England, say producing mules to sell at a sale, you would potentially restrict those sale of those sheep going into Scotland if they weren't Bluetongue vaccinated, because the Scottish government want everything certified vaccinated before it goes over the border. So you may find that there's more vaccination going on in the north because of that trade implication. The issue of vaccines are now, of course, the UK product is, or printed labels, that's running out. So there's a big push now to try and get more product in from Europe. So the next confusion will be when you've ordered your vaccine, it might take 10, 14 days or longer to come. When it does arrive, it may have a foreign label on it. But that's another amazingly helpful at this stage Brexit bonus that, of course, we can't have the same labels as the EU now. We have to have our own ones. So, yes, European vaccine will be coming in hopefully very soon, which will start to address some of the demand profile, because it is definitely worth vaccinating these animals, particularly as we approach breeding seasons where they haven't been done, because it might lessen the impact of the virus as we head into that really critical time.
The message still very much then to vaccinate.
Yeah, it is. And I think, we've been through a lot of, particularly in the East, we've been through a lot of pain and And we've been through nothing like the cases and the mortality that's happening at the moment in the southwest. But in terms of, when this strain of Bluetongue first landed in the east, 3 years ago, huge restrictions on farmers are in Norfolk, in Kent. Some people's businesses paralysed for months on end. They couldn't move anything in or out of the zone as Defra tried to slow the movement of this disease west. All the licensing, all the vaccinating we did from the Bluetongue zone going with cattle going to the west. So there's a lot of work been done to try and slow this. And of course, it's the perfect storm. It's finally heated up. Finally, the viral replication's gone up to a level that we saw in Holland in 2023. And so there's much more virus around because of this heat. The last 2 summers have been pretty benign, and it's created this perfect storm, particularly where there are naive animals that haven't been vaccinated, particularly in this area of the southwest. And that's what we're seeing happening now. But there's still the message from vets and from everyone is, obviously if something's got the disease, there's no point vaccinating it. But if animals look healthy and there may be other animals on the farm that do show symptoms, the message is to get them vaccinated, because it's not a binary thing that just because one animal's got it, it's going to go through the whole field. Believe it or not, the midges are quite selective what they bite. Thank God it's not a nose-to-nose type disease that goes through like wildfire. It can sort of slowly meander through. So stop that meandering, get vaccinated, and there will be a delay to get that, but at least it might protect flocks and herds as we head into that critical breeding season.
An update on Bluetongue then. Louise, also an update on the sustainable farming incentive.
Yeah, Defra's come up with a bit of information for us this week. As we all know, we're still in this window one, which had the £60 million worth of funding put against it or in it. They've told us this week that they have offered over 1,188 agreements, and of those, 922 had been accepted by July the 31st. So there is some action, things are happening there. They have also said that window one will close by August the 28th. Now, obviously, it'll be a little bit sooner than that if all the money gets used up. But it'll close then, and any money that possibly gets left over will go into the window two offer. That's going to open in September. That's the one that's open to everyone. And as yet, they haven't given us a actual date for that. We just know it's September. So I'm sure lots of people have been or are busy getting their applications ready, because I think as soon as that one opens, there's going to be a real stampede. But that's the latest situation. So at least they are keeping everybody informed, and we know where we stand.
Thank you, Louise. The latest situation then on the sustainable farming incentive. Before that, the latest situation on Bluetongue with Hugh. Now we're going to look at the latest situation with harvest. We're joined now by grain marketing consultant Richard Whitlock. Richard, welcome to the podcast. Yields down on many farms, challenges too around crop quality. You're warning that protein levels are in fact too high in many cases for millers.
Yeah, it's actually the bakers that struggle. The millers will cope very, very well with the good quality that we've got this year, but they make the flour for the next man down the chain, i.e. the baker. And what the baker wants, more especially, is a consistent product, consistent flour. And this year, other baking parameters aside, if we've got too many high protein wheats, similar to what the miller would normally include of Canadian, maybe German wheat, then we're going to be above the higher specification that the baker can naturally manage. So what he's going to probably have to do is look at some way of watering down the quality, the high quality a little bit, to bring it back within specification. It happens the other way around. If we have a poor harvest of quality, we've got to put something in it to boost it up to specification. Otherwise, we end up with variable loaves of bread, or worse still, unacceptable loaves of bread. And of course, the consumer wants something that's good all the time, and they want something that's consistent. So that's what we're looking at, is keeping it within the quality parameters.
Not necessarily the case then that higher quality is going to offset the lower returns achieved from these lower yields.
No. It is about making sure that you have the mechanization and automation in today's milling and baking systems mean that they have to always operate on a consistent product. It's a bit like if a farmer buys fertilizer, he wants, say, 34% nitrogen. He doesn't want one load to be 25% and the next load to be 45% that he's putting through his machine. He wants it the same all the time so he can run it as automatically and cost effectively as possible.
A little bit of expectation management needed then, Richard. You're also warning growers to be careful who they sell their grain to. A little bit more due diligence needed than usual, perhaps. What do you mean by that?
Well, if I've done my annual survey of all of the grain merchants that buy ex-farm first-hand grain, and if I look at that analysis, we've seen a 65% drop in the before-tax profitability of all of the merchants combined. And picking out one statistic in particular, the year before last, Frontier Agriculture earned more pre-tax profit than everybody else in the following year, including Frontier combined. That shows you how big a fall-off we've had. A lot of that is due because the size of the cake is so much smaller that merchants have got to work with. All of these farmers going in for a percentage of their land in various SFI schemes means that you might sell him the seed, but then and the advice, but then you haven't got any fertilizer or spray to sell him. You certainly haven't got any crop to buy from him. And then last year, to some extent, maybe this year to an even greater extent, there's a smaller percentage of crop to buy because the yields are low. So that all of the merchants rely on a small margin and large turnover, where they're not going to have that chance for a high turnover. And we haven't even seen the big rise in prices because around the world, particularly in the wheat market, there's still plenty of stock. So the rally in prices that might have offset this hasn't arrived either. And that's going to be tough. And I do know some merchants already within their own businesses, in terms of staff and other overhead resources, are doing some cost-cutting exercises.
So if I'm a farmer, who should I be selling my grain to, Richard? What should I be looking for in a buyer?
Many farmers sell to people who they like and who they trust, and I would still put that as very high priorities, and obviously somebody that gives you good service. But if you look down my list of who's on that list, strong balance sheets are probably an important one, but also combine that with consistent, even modest profitability. I know from a merchant that went bust a couple of 3 years ago, he had said that the year before he went bust, that he'd earned over £7 million, and then the following year, he went bust for nearly £70 million. So sometimes there could be some people who maybe don't quite lie as straight in bed as you want to, and they would hide their problems. But I think the vast majority of merchants are good people trying to do a good job, and stick with the people, ask the merchant how his business is doing. You need to speak to the principal rather than the salesman, maybe. Also, if you're uncertain about the person that you're selling to, you might choose to take a small discount and ask for either payment before the grain is moved, or have it so that you only sell a small amount per month to a merchant you're slightly insecure feeling with.
Richard Whitlock, thank you very much. That's grain marketing consultant Richard Whitlock with some words of wisdom for growers selling grain this harvest. If you want to get hold of that list of merchants, we'll put a link to Richard's email newsletter in the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. That's the grain markets then. Hugh, the other markets, including grain, what's happening?
Thank you very much, Johan. Finish steer dead weight average this week. 608.4. That's 608.5. That's gone up 1.2 pence on the week, so it's still slowly trotting up. The live weight 346.2. That's actually lost 0.7 of a penny on the week. Onto the sheep markets. Just some heat coming out of those sheep prices. at the moment, possibly because, I don't know, you'd have thought finished lambs would be strong because there's not many good finished lambs around because it's so dry and there's no forage. But it's dropped back. It's probably dropped back nearly 30p. SQQ last week was 809.2. This week 781.4. So it's dropped back quite a bit. The live weight SQQ 320.2. That's dropped back 32p. On the week. So plenty of sheep going into market there. Plenty of stall lambs around as well as people struggle to get finish on them. Pig prices 178.34. It stands on exactly. So that's good news. The pig erosion is stopping. Hopefully for a long time. Hopefully we'll start seeing go back up again. Arable markets, all of it not particularly sexy this week. Feed wheat, after all those buoyings on, all the sort of stuff that was going on in the Black Sea, with ships being bombed, so grain couldn't move about, and the Americans panicking about their reserves and that they might have a rubbish harvest. It obviously buoyed it all on a bit, but it's just eased back. 187.1 is the wheat or the feed wheat spot price this week. So that's gone on about £1.20 on the week there. So you're slightly richer than you were last week. Milling wheat 198 dead. That's actually lost £4.80 on the week. Feed barley 165.2. That's lost 10 pence on the week. Oil seed rate 423.3. That has lost nearly £10, about £9 come off the oil seed rate price. Feed peas has lost £6, 200.4. Feed beans 218.7. That's actually gained nearly £3 on the week. And not surprisingly, diesel price is actually eased back a bit. Actually, now he's decided this week he's suddenly stopped bombing again, hasn't he? So they're in peace talks again till they start up again. But at the moment they've stopped bombing in Iran, so it's dropped back about 5p. 93.82 pence per litre on the Wednesday morning ring round. So those are your prices this week.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, this year marks a very special birthday, 150 years for the Aberdeen Angus cattle breed. Leading figures from the Aberdeen Angus Cattle Society are gathering next week for the official publication of the breed's 150th herd book. Those celebrations will be taking place at Ballindalloch Castle in the Scottish Highlands, about 90 minutes from Aberdeen. And Farmers Weekly reporter Anne Dunn caught up with Breed Society Chief Executive Robert Gilchrist at last month's Royal Welsh Show.
Robert, the 150th volume of the Herd Book, a milestone for you?
Very much so, Anne, yeah. So from 1862 when volume 1 first appeared, right the way through to today, it just shows that dedication and commitment of the breeders and the longevity of the breed, and the fact that the Angus has got something to offer for everyone. So yeah, no, it's great to be here, and here's the next 150.
We're right next to the Aberdeen Angus Cattle Lines here at the Royal Welsh Show. What makes this breed so special?
I find the Aberdeen Angus a fascinating breed because what it does is it both gives the farmer the things that they need on farm to make money, as in fat in the back, which cuts down winter costs, and also in a summer like this actually means the cow can carry herself through the summer. Gives you the intramuscular fat that's that instant energy reserve, so you can outwinter, and it keeps them resilient in the winter. But at the same time, that fat in the back also really is of value when it comes into the processor, and they can hand cattle better, and that intramuscular fat gives you eating quality that the consumer values. So it's one of those animals that fits at every point in the chain, and also cheap to keep, and just love the breed and love the cattle.
The red meat sector is under pressure to reduce emissions. What is the Aberdeen Angus Cattle Society doing to help producers achieve that?
So we have, over the last 12 months, been migrating to a new member database. From that member database, we will have better access to the DNA that we're working with. We're currently sitting with just around 80,000 DNA profiles on cattle, which we are using to back up the EBVs, which obviously brings through your growth rates, brings through all those production aspects. And at the same time, we are currently working through a refresh of our performance indices, so be able to give folk a better means of picking bulls on those performance figures. to better fit with what their aims are, be that a maternal animal or a dairy beef calf.
So 150 volumes on, it's still a very relevant breed today. What's the future for the Aberdeen Angus?
I think we've recognised from the start that the 150th volume is not about just recognising the 150th volume. It's about recognising the fact that we've called this whole initiative 150 and beyond, because we're looking to the next 150 years. Later this year, we will, as I say, launch this new member database whereby we'll have all the access to the DNA and all these things, and I think that shows that we're here today looking at the future there. And yet you go back to those early herd books, and that was the key technology at the time, and I think it just shows that the Angus all the way through, that Aberdeen Angus breed has been working with the most modern technology it can at every stage, and we want to stay at that bleeding edge, and we want to keep those members breeding, keep those cattle coming forward. But at the same time, giving that consumer the eating quality and the high quality steak on the plate that they've come to expect, and all done in the sustainable manner that we're expected to do so.
That's Aberdeen Angus Cattle Society Chief Executive Robert Gilchrist talking to Farmers Weekly's Anne Dunn. Sir Hugh, 150 years of the Aberdeen Angus Herd Book.
Yes, it is a well-established breed, isn't it? Not just here, but of course globally, Angus cattle, you will find them pretty much on all the continents of the world, but particularly, obviously, within the sort of Eurasian area and massively still hugely popular in America, both North and South America. And there, the Angus breed carries on going from strength to strength.
Louise, a long-standing cattle breed, we don't really see many arable crop varieties lasting as long as 150 years. They seem to come and go with a lot more frequency.
Well, we churn through them a bit quicker, don't we? That's probably the way that I would put it. But of course, successful cereal varieties have many of the attributes that successful cattle have. So, they have to work for the end user and for the market just as much as they have to work for the farmer. So a really good example there with the Aberdeen Angus breed, that it's continuing to do that. And let's hope it does get another 150 years doing just that. And obviously that's what anything that farmers produce has to do. It has to work for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, some similarities, but also some huge differences. And I think probably a bit more science goes behind the breeding of crop varieties, but I'm very prepared to be shot down if that's wrong.
You're not wrong, Louise. You're not wrong. The thing is, Johan, when you look at, Louise makes a good point about the wheat varieties. So if you can imagine, if we know that the likes of, NIAB and all of the, whether it's Rothamsted, the seed companies, the wonderful seed companies breeding all these varieties, the millions they put in and the years, the decade and a half they spend developing a wheat variety. Imagine if actually all they did was stood round a ring dressed in tweed and said, "Oh, that's a pretty looking wheat plant. I quite like the length of that plant. I love the ear. I like the shape of the ear." And if that was about as much as the science that they got into, that would pretty much reflect what's happened with cattle over the last 10,000 years. Plus, I'm being slightly facetious and disingenuous, but I mean, effectively, we've gone from European bison 10,000 years ago to all the wonderful cattle breeds we have now, but by effectively selectively breeding them. And yes, there's a bit more than that because obviously there's sciences. But then many people will criticise some of the EBV systems because if you feed animals well, you breed animals, you feed the bulls like mad, and they look really good on paper, but as soon as they go out in the field, they melt. Well, that's not a lot of use to you. But it's great to hear the Angus Society looking at DNA. You heard your man there mentioning DNA. Now, what they're actually doing with that DNA, he didn't actually tell us, but I'm assuming something along the lines of genomic analysis. And the interesting thing now is if you look at those Angus breeds or those Angus cattle, I think you've got your show cattle, but the bulls that will deliver amazing feed efficiency, amazing IMF marbling, and all of the things we want as a trait, say, for a dairy cross bull, if you wheeled that bull out into a showroom, they'd all walk the other way. It wouldn't look sexy enough for them, so they'd probably discount it. So perhaps the showing of the future is the big reveal of genomic data on a big electronic board, and everyone bets money on it. I don't know. But it's, look, we've got to where we are now. Congratulations, 150 years. But the next 150 years has really got to embrace the data, whether that's around emissions, eating quality, all of the stuff that we need to get out of the cattle if we're going to keep growing them efficiently with the least amount of food and emitting the least amount of methane.
Well, there you are. 150 years of the Aberdeen Angus Herd Book, a breed just as relevant today as it was 150 years ago, and with big plans for the next 150 years. Happy birthday to the Aberdeen Angus. That is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please do, as always, leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode was brought to you by Bayer Crop Science, weeding out uncertainty.